Hare Krishna devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Gurudev. Yeah, we are about to start for today's session in a couple of minutes. Please stay tuned. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, we're just a minute past an hour. We are waiting for the Prabhus to join. Then we'll start soon. Hare Krishna devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Sorry to make you wait, and we are looking forward to his association of His Grace Shankaranand Prabhuji. Please be patient, and he will be joining shortly. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yeah. Hare Krishna. Just talk to Prabhuji. Prabhuji will be joining in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. We just start in 2 minutes, Prabhu. I'm just getting ready.
Sure, Prabhu. Sure, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Sorry.
Hare Krishna, Shankaranand Prabhuji, please accept our humble obeisances. Prabhupada.
Sorry for the delay, Prabhu.
No, not at all, Prabhuji. Completely understand. It's I know you're in a PST time zone. Completely understand, Prabhuji. Before getting further, just have a brief introduction about you to the congregation, Prabhuji. I just wanted to introduce His Grace Shankaranand Prabhuji. Shankaranand Prabhuji is a senior disciple of His Holiness Varnasrama Maharaj, and he has been in ISKCON movement and leadership services in different levels. And he led New Vrindavan as a temple president and one of the key management members for almost 20 years in New Vrindavan Temple. And he has been participating in book distribution and so many other services. And it's very fortunate to have Prabhuji's association today. And today's, as most of us know, today's topic is Varnashrama Dharma from a Vedic perspective in today's current society. Today is the second part of the two-part series, and I would like to request all the devotees in Richmond or out of Richmond, please take advantage out of this session. And unfortunately, today we missed His Grace Divinam Prabhuji because he has a conflict, last-minute conflict, where one of the ISKCON services, so he could not make it, and we miss him. Without waiting any more time, let's take Prabhuji's association in this class. Thank you so much.
And once again, I'm sorry to all the devotees. I was actually in the middle of another sign which took a little longer than I expected. But let's get started. ज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वापदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजाता सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपादा सहगना लब्धा श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। पांचाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। Thank you very much, all the devotees. So last week we had discussed about the basics or the introductory part of the Varnashrama. So today we'll be discussing about the practical aspect of it. You know, whatever we discussed last time was just philosophical understanding of what Varnashrama is and how it existed in the past. So today we'll be discussing how practically it could actually benefit the society and how it can be done. So there are two things mainly we'll try to discuss. Varnashrama acharavata purushena parahapama Vishnu आराधते नान्यसस्तोषकारणम्. So the purpose of Varnashrama has to be understood. Varnashrama Chirvata Purushenam Parakumar Vishnu Aradhate. The purpose of Varnashram is to bring everyone to Vishnu Aradhana. Vishnu Aradhana is nothing but like watering the root. So if you want to have the garden flourish, you have to start watering the roots of all the trees and creepers. Then only the garden can flourish. So similarly, Varnashram practice can be compared with, nurturing a garden. But that garden can never be flourishing if you're not watering the roots of all the trees and creepers. And the root of everyone and all living entities is Krishna, our Lord Vishnu. He is the root. So Vishnu Aradhana is actually the ultimate purpose of Varnashram. There is no other purpose, Many times in the Vedic scripture, you'll find there are different goals or purposes are mentioned, but the ultimate purpose of Varnashram is to teach everyone and bring everyone to the platform of Vishnu Aradhana. Okay. So, and as we discussed last week, it is the framework in which the Vishnu Aradhana can be practiced most efficiently and most smoothly. So now let's try to look at how this was done in the past practically and how we can do it, in our current society. So as we discussed last week, if you remember, the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, these were the two, Varnas, which were actually very close in proximity with each other, and they would work with each other, for the welfare of the whole society. Of course, everyone else would also participate, but these two are like, the administrators of the society. So, say for example, if a king in the past or a, government wanted to set up a new city or develop a new city or a new village or a new community of people to live together, how they used to do it, So, first and foremost, it's not that you choose any place to develop a city. The development of a city or a community or a village had mainly two criteria, two factors which were considered most crucial, and that required the inputs from the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas. So whenever they wanted to develop a city, for example, or a village, one of the Brahmanas who would be very learned in the Vedic science of Vastu, he, along with a good Kshatriya, would survey the land. They would go for surveying the land. And the survey would consider 2 points. One was how conducive the land is in terms of celestial influences to develop a city. Because celestial influences count the quality of life people who will live on that land or in that, community. So Brahmanas were expert in judging the celestial influences. And the technique which was used was the science of Vastu Shastra. So Brahmana who used to be learned in Vastu Shastra would accompany a good administrator and go and survey the land. That's a beginning. Because what we see a land, apparently with our eyes, could have some subtle and hidden influences which ordinary people cannot see. Just to give you an example, in 2013, I moved to Sacramento, from New Vrindavan. So when I was new to this place, I was living in, particular place. But there were devotees here. So one devotee he invited for one of the evening programs in his home. And I still remember that day I attended the program in his home. They were living in a particular, apartment complex. And as soon as I entered in the apartment complex, I was feeling, for no reason, everything was fine, but I was, for no reason, started feeling depressed. I started feeling so low. I just wanted to get out. I thought, maybe I shouldn't even attend the program. I should go out from this place. But anyway, I attended the program. Of course, Association of Devotees always enlivening. So it was a nice program. But whenever I went to that community, that complex, apartment complex, I would have that low feeling. I would feel like, you don't want to be in this place. You want to get out of this place as soon as possible. And when the devotee moved out of that complex, he said he felt exactly the same thing all the time. He lived for, I think, a couple of years in that complex. He said he always felt like that in that complex. He just wanted to be out of that place as soon as possible. So he's working with the city government. So he found out, the history of that place. And he told me that this place, before this apartment complex was built, was used as a cremation ground. It was a cemetery where people were buried and dead people were buried in the ground. So there you go. So something that we cannot see with our eyes, a Brahmana who is very actually learned in the science of Vastu can find out such influences. Because the land, for example, which is used for burying the dead bodies, that is a breeding ground for all kinds of subtle influences, especially the ghosts, goblins, and all kinds of low energies. They reside there. Even if you remove the cemetery from that place imbibes that energy. Therefore, especially homes, for example, people don't even look at the home. They say, oh, this is the foreclosure home. Oh, this is getting such a low price, I can go and buy that home. But homes where people have died in a very tormenting way, like somebody was murdered in a place, for example, or somebody died in a very, very, distressful or an unnatural way of dying in this, that place becomes, filled with those vibrations. So as soon as you start living in that home, you can feel the presence of those energies. And even if somebody is devotee, somebody will think, oh, I am practicing Krishna consciousness, I'm a devotee, so none of these things will bother. It's not true. Until unless you are a pure devotee, fully surrendered to Krishna, all these things tremendously impact our surroundings, impact. So a Brahmana would judge the whole land for those subtle influences and the way the land is receiving the celestial blessings, or it is attracting the celestial curses. That all can be evaluated by a learned Brahmana by surveying that land. And in scripture there are many tests are given how you can test the land. So Brahmanas who perform those tests, say, for example, there are a couple of things I just try to explain. So whenever they would go to see the land, there are few tests which are actually very essential. One is the sloping of the land. If the land is flat, it is good, but the land has slope. The slope should be in a particular direction. Okay, the land sloping should be in a particular direction. If the place has, like, if you want to develop a city or a community, then, or even if you're living in a home, you're trying to buy a place or a home for your own residence, in what part of the city you buy, it also makes a lot of difference. Okay. Because people collectively, what kind of life they will have is also very much determined by the surroundings of that place. So, in simple terms, according to the principles of Vastu, for example, the celestial blessings come from two directions, from the north and the east. These are the two directions where the blessings comes from. And the celestial curses, or you can say, negative energies, flow from south and west. So just imagine if you have the slope towards south and west, then all the curses actually are flowing and you are exposed to them. Especially, after I moved to US, I saw people prefer to have the, home on the south or west slope, because, most of the US part is actually very cold. So people think if I have south slope, then I have a lot of sunlight, especially afternoon and evening sunlight. If I have west slope, I would have a lot of, evening sunlight. Whereas, along with the evening sunlight, you also get a lot of negative energies flowing to your life. But if the slope is towards north and east, which is the most undesirable thing people think in this country. If especially having north slope, people think, oh no, it's too cold, because you'll not get, afternoon or evening sunlight. And especially just imagine all the northern parts of US, or even Canada, entire Canada. People prefer to have the south and west slope, but that also attracts a lot of negative energy, and therefore you see people more or less living in such homes have, not such a quality of life, because they attract a lot of negative influences in their lives. And even from the perspective, the weather perspective, the most of the winds in the entire year, if you calculate, most of the winds actually come from south and west. So if you have south and west up, you actually block those winds as well. And that personally I experienced in New Vrindavan as well. In New Vrindavan, there were two apartment complexes. So one was situated on the, having south and west fully exposed. So a lot of sunlight used to come in the afternoon, and especially in the winter time, that's people consider a great blessing. But another apartment complex was situated on the northeast slope. So especially after 2:30 in the afternoon, you will not see the sun only. And I live in both the complexes. And I lived in the complex which was exposed southwest, a lot of sunlight would come. In that home, our electricity bill would come actually, for a single apartment unit we had, would be, enormous amount of bill. I'm just talking about electricity bill just to keep that building heated up. There's nothing wrong with the building, but just a single apartment unit, we used to have, say, for example, $150, electricity bill. Then we moved to other building complex, which was actually situated in the northeast slope. And I always felt warm and nice in that apartment. And our electricity bill was always almost half of the previous. And we had double unit apartment, bigger apartment. And our electricity bill was almost half of the previous apartment. So people don't really understand this. Because if you are having southwest open, a lot of winds come, and wind chill factor, we know how it affects to cooling and heating a place. So people don't realize this. So Brahmanas used to actually evaluate all these things while building a community, while building a city or a town or a village. So this was one aspect. The Kshatriyas would evaluate a place from security perspective, how they can secure from the attacks of the enemies. So if there are any ways and means to secure the flat land or sloping land, how they can secure, because Kshatriya's concern would be the attack from the enemies, or even attack from the thieves and rogues. Sometimes, terrorism is not only a new thing now, but it has always existed, always existed in different forms. So thieves and dacoits in the past used to be like terrorists, and they would enter in a city or town or a village and plunder people, kill people. So a Kshatriya's concern would be how to protect people, who are living in our kingdom. So that used to be the two concerns. And if the Brahmana and Kshatriya, they both agreed that yes, this is a nice place to develop, then only they would bring other people and start developing a city. It used to be planned not only in terms of providing the necessities, but also in terms of celestial influences. So this was the practical aspect. We want to develop a community. It's so essential. Not that we just, go and see a land and it is available cheaply and just buy it. This is actually a crucial aspect. And even, a land, how prosperous it would be. People living in that land, how prosperous they would be. You can actually evaluate a simple test. For example, the Varaha Purana explains that if you want to evaluate how prosperous that place would be, you simply go to the land, dig a hole, about 1 by 1 by 1 feet, 1 cubic feet, so 1 feet length, 1 feet breadth, and 1 feet deep, and fill that hole with water and come back in 24 hours. If the water is still retained in that hole, some water, of course, it won't be the whole water, but some water is retained, that means the land will be prosperous. But if the water is gone and you see the cracks in the ground, that means that these people in this place will struggle. There is no blessings. But there's a simple test done, which influences which we not know, but these simple tests will actually tell you how prosperous the place would be. And who doesn't want prosperity? Everybody wants that, People living in my kingdom should be prosperous. A king would consider, a government would consider, if people are prosperous, they will pay nice taxes, and the whole situation would be nice for everyone. So this used to be the one aspect. How they would start actually developing a community. But then, as we discussed last week, the Brahmanas used to be the head of the society. So they're like the head, they're giving direction. So the head can actually see any problem or any difficulty coming. The first is perceived by the head because eyes are in the head. So the head can perceive the difficulty very first. So Brahmanas could actually foresee the difficulties coming individually or collectively. And that was seen through the aspect of astrology, Vedic astrology especially. So Vedic astrology used to be a tool which was used by the Brahmanas to see. Astrology in Sanskrit is called Jyotisha, Jyotish Shastra. So Jyotisha is composed of two words in Sanskrit, Jyotir and Isha. So Jyoti means illumination or light, and Isha means God. So Jyotisha is nothing but the illumination or direction given by God. So these are eyes of the God. Jyotisha is considered like the eyes of God. So, we say God has to be omniscient omnipotent, right? So omniscient means one who can see the past, present, and future entirely. There is no error in his seeing past, present, and future. That is God. God means he knows what exactly happened billions and billions of years ago, in which part of the universe, with whom, what happened. He knows everything from the past. He knows what is happening currently, everywhere, every nook and corner of creation. What is happening, he knows that. What is going on in my mind is what is going on in each and every living entity's mind, he knows that. And what will transpire in the future is also known to him. So that potency of the Lord, for the welfare of the society, the God has given that in the form of Jyotish Shastra. So Jyotish Shastra is nothing but the science of symptoms and science of celestial planetary influences. Two things are actually considered very important in that. One is the placement of all the planets, the celestial planets, especially there are 9 of them in the Vedic astrology. So 9 planets, their position communicates certain influences for the people of this world collectively. And it also communicates individually for each and every individual. Those 9 planets actually communicate a lot of messages. And a good astrologer can actually see that. So, take a simple example. The divorce rate, especially in US, the divorce rate is almost like 60 to 70% in the first 3 years of marriage. I'm just giving the official study, which I saw many years, almost I think a decade ago. I don't know what are the studies now, but considering the situations, I think it'll be worst only. But I see in 70% divorce, that means 7 out of 10 marriages finish in the first 3 years. And if you consider the gap of 10 years, almost 9 of 10 marriages, out of 10 marriages, they end up in divorce. This is the divorce rate in US. So, and when 10 years back I was doing some presentation, I had seen some statistics. That time, the divorce rate in India was 0.1%. Just imagine, 0.1%. I'm sure it must have increased now in India also, because India also is becoming more kind of westernized. So people have become more and more materialistic. So, and they've started neglecting these ancient sciences. So I'm sure that the divorce rate must have increased. So let's try to understand this. What is exactly the divorce? Of course, governments have sanctioned the divorce now practically in every country. 50 years ago, there was no concept of divorce. Especially in India, there was no divorce. So even if a husband and wife could separate, they would separate only, to live separate. There was no question of remarriage and all. So let's try to understand what exactly divorce is. Especially, you see, I see in the Europe and America, boy and girl, they live with each other for a few years before even they get married, right? To understand. And in spite of that, after marriage, within 3 to 5 years, they divorce. Why? That means even if I lived with a person for a few years, I was thinking that I will understand the person and I'll understand the inclinations and the mindset of the person. And then if I feel that it's tuning with my mindset, then it's okay, I'll get married. But in spite of living with few years, you still can't make out. That means there are many things which we cannot see simply by living with a person in day-to-day life. Now take a simple example. In ordinary household life, you see sometimes children, in childhood, they are so restless, so mischievous. And they will continue to be more and more mischievous. And all of a sudden they attain certain age and they become like an angel. And then parents say, oh, till the age of 12, this boy troubled me so much. But as soon as he turned 13, in teenage, people generally become terrible, but he became like an angel. And sometimes in reverse, oh, this boy was such an angel in childhood. But as soon as he became a teenager, he has become terrible. All of us, we have experience, right? I'm sure parents, they experience. If you see the children's life, if you have grown up children, you see their life, the pattern changes so much, in their behavior, in their, in their inclinations, in their aspirations, everything changes. In the matter of 20 years, you will see such a dramatic change in children. And when we grow up, nothing changes. The same pattern continues. Why? Because astrologically, everyone's life is divided into certain periods of life. It's called Dasha, Dasha system. So there are 9 planets in the astrology, especially Sun, Moon, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, Rahu, Ketu, the 9 planets. So everyone's lifespan is ruled at different times by these different planets. And each of these planets may represent different aspects of life for each individual. There are 12 different aspects of life. Every human being's life is divided into 12 different aspects, according to Vedic Astrology. And these 9 planets, they rule all these 12 aspects. So, say for example, the person's body, how healthy a body would be, how beautiful the body would be, these are the aspects seen from the very first house called Lagna in the birth chart. Similarly, how wealthy a person would be. What will be his family background, wealthy family or good family or bad family or criminal's family, what family background the person will have. That can be seen by the second house of the birth chart. What kind of siblings a person will have, how many siblings a person will have, how a relationship with the siblings would be, is seen through the third house. How many homes, landed properties or cars person will own, how his relationship with mother would be, how his mother would be, whether you lose a mother early or his mother will be long lived. All that is seen through the fourth house. So there are different aspects of life. In this way, there are 12 different aspects. The 12 houses of zodiac in 12 different aspects, including when a person would die, when a person would get married, when a person would have diseases, when a person will meet with an accident, what kind of fortunes, how his father would be. All these are seen through the different aspects of life. And when the different planets ruling these different aspects of life are ruling the period of the person's life, there will be enormous changes in the person's thinking, in the person's behavior. Everything will change in those dasha, according to those dashas. So this is seen through the eyes of astrology. A good astrologer can predict and see, okay, this boy, this girl, they can live very happily together. Through the matching of the horoscope, they can see, okay, they will actually live very happily with each other. Happily doesn't mean that they will be always happy. There will be ups and downs in their lives. But when there are ups, they will remain composed. When there are downs, they'll be able to tolerate each other and get through that phase. So there is no such thing as a perfect man or perfect woman. Okay. But there can be a good match. There's no perfect match, but there's a good match can be there. So you'll see sometime the man may be good and a woman may be good, but they get married, they become so bad with each other. Like literally like cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry. They cannot tolerate each other. They're always on getting onto case of each other. Practically loggers, holding the loggers at hand. That happens. And then you may find somebody, the man is so loose in character, very bad, and woman is also similarly loose and bad in character, but they live very happily with each other. They are like the perfect match for each other. So it doesn't matter how a person's personal character or personal aspirations are. The Jyotish Shastra, the astrology actually gives us insight. It's basically, when you're especially using the astrology for matching the horoscopes, you can actually figure out how these people will be able to tolerate each other in the tiring circumstances. Especially when the difficulties come, that's when people walk away from each other. They cannot handle, if they have so many things coming from outside and they are also having fights at home, they cannot tolerate. But good astrological match simply indicates how they will actually get through those difficult times together. So it's actually wonderful insight. Just imagine 70% divorce rate and 0.1% divorce rate. Because the science has been practiced in India since ages. People would never get married. At least, I remember 100 years, I've heard from, so 100 years ago, there was no question of marriage without consulting the family priest who would actually do the matching of horoscopes. It used to be. And still, a lot of people use India, but it's becoming obsolete now, more and more obsolete. And therefore, people have more and more disharmony. Okay. So these are another signs which was actually used to make people's life much more smoother. Now just imagine, now things from devotees or practicing devotees perspective. Okay, say for example, a man and woman got married. They both are devotees. They got married, but they have always strenuous relationship at home. How can they practice Krishna consciousness? If they are fighting all the time, quarreling all the time, with each other, how there can be, focus on the ultimate purpose of life? It's so difficult. So using help of a good astrologer simply makes or facilitates to avoid that particular difficulty in life. Similarly, using the science of Vastu avoids the unnecessary difficulties in life. But we should always remember, if you're using the science of Vastu, astrology, Ayurveda, and all these different sciences, Vedic sciences, doesn't mean that this world becomes Sukhalayam or happy place. No. Krishna says this world is Dukhalayam. This world still remains Dukhalayam. It's a place of distress or miseries. You still will have miseries coming in your life. But at least you are not working for miseries. Like in Hindi, there's a saying, "Aa bail mujhe maar." Person practically goes and tells the troubles, please come to my life. Like inviting the miseries or troubles in the life. So by neglecting these guidance from the Brahmanas, Brahminical society, you are simply avoiding inviting these unnecessary troubles in life. But the life is still, the world still remains a distressful place. Practice of Krishna consciousness simply is to get out of this material existence and experience happiness even while living in this world. by dint of Krishna consciousness. Because a person who is engaged in Krishna consciousness naturally feels happy and satisfied under all circumstances. So, till we are on the sadhaka stage, we take the help of these signs. Now, just take another example of one more aspect of Varnashrama Dharma, Ayurveda, for example. Now, of course, what we know nowadays, Ayurveda is a very shallow, very, very shallow Ayurveda. You don't really get to see a lot of Ayurvedic physicians or doctors nowadays. And therefore people don't even have much faith in it. But I'll just tell you a few experiences from my own life. I'll just share, and we'll understand, what exactly Ayurveda is and how much capable of it is. How it actually minimizes miseries in our life or distress in our life. So Prabhupada actually mentions in some of the conversations that Ayurvedic physician or a doctor, he's called Kaviraj. If you go to him, he can simply take your pulse, and within 30 seconds on, he will give you your medical history of your entire life. An expert Ayurvedic Kaviraj, simply by taking your pulse, not only he will tell you the entire life history, medical history of your life, but he'll also tell you when you will die, at what age you will die. He can predict precisely, simply by taking pulse. Just imagine. And of course, we don't get to see that much very often, but personally, I experienced something like that. There's one particular doctor, in Mayapur, in Navadvip, which is in Bengal, near Kolkata. Devotees generally know Navadvip, where Navadvip is. But those who may not know, this is in India. It's one of the towns, small townships, about 180 kilometers west of Kolkata. So my wife, many years ago, I believe it was started in 2000 and I think 2007, she started having some pain in the hand. So she would have pain, especially in the hand, upper portion of the hand. And she was taking painkillers, but after some time, painkillers stopped working, and the pain became so acute that we have to go to doctor. We went to the emergency room, and they did all kinds of tests. They draw the blood from her. They did the scanning, and all kinds of testing was done. At the end of the testing, the conclusion was there's nothing wrong. Everything is all right. Just take painkiller. And she said, I took the painkiller, it didn't work, therefore I'm here. But anyway, the doctor said, no, there's nothing to worry. Don't worry. And, it went on. The pain didn't stop there. It went on increasing over the years, because doctors couldn't help. So she practically accepted as part of life. It went on increasing, went till the neck. It reached to the neck. So the whole portion was paining her all the time. So, we were trying different doctors. We tried to find an Ayurvedic doctor, but none of could really help. Then we found this one. Somebody referred to my wife that, he's actually really good. So we went to him. He took her pulse, and he started chastising her. What nonsense you are doing? You're suffering since so many years. Why you're not curing yourself? No. So she said, I tried. She didn't even tell him what the problem was. She didn't tell him anything about what the problem was. He took the pulse and he started telling her, you have pain here. And all this, last 7-8 years medical history, he told her. what pain she was going through and what all she went through. Everything in details he actually told her. It was shocking. How can somebody, without taking any blood, doing any scans, tell all the medical history as if he had all the medical access records to him, and he's living in some small township in India. There's no way, that he could have access to any of that information. And he told all the information, all the details. And then he said, your health is spoiled so badly that it'll take a long time to actually recover from this. I'll give you medication, but you have to take the medication for at least few years to recover to healthy condition. So we said, all right, because we cannot live there for years, but we thought, we'll keep taking medications from him and try. But when he gave the medication, the pain which my wife was going through for 7 years, 8 years, she was holding that pain, disappeared in 3 days. She said, I never knew what it is to live without that pain. She was constantly in pain. And 3 days, the pain disappeared. But the doctor said, your system is damaged to great extent. You have to take medication for a few years. So she did. She had been taking medication, of course. She couldn't continue the entire few years, but she's in better shape. Much better shape. She doesn't have any pains anymore. But doctor gave her guidance. What are the things which would trigger the pains? What are the things which would actually, trigger? What food substance she eats will trigger those kinds of pains. And we have seen. I remember when I was in the ashram, Brahmachari ashram, I had severe pain in the stomach. Severe pain. And nothing was getting digested. Anything I eat, it was just coming out in the motions, loose motions, and nothing could get digested. It went on for 3 months. I lost so much weight. So same thing, we had a Bhakti in the hospital. The doctors actually did so many scans and everything on it. They were all devotee doctors. So there's no question that, they will have any vested interest. They did all kind of scan, everything. They couldn't find anything, everything negative. But still the case was that I had some pain in the stomach and nothing was getting digested. So the doctor who was actually treating me, he told me, maybe you have tuberculosis of the stomach. I said, Prabhu, please don't say maybe. If you cannot figure out, no, he said, no, I think we should start the medication of tuberculosis. I said, tuberculosis? You saw everything has come negative and you want to start medication of tuberculosis. But he said, no, you should start. And I refused. I said, I cannot start the tuberculosis medication. Is so, intense. It has so much side effects. I cannot take it. But he insisted, and he told the temple authority that he should take that medication. That will help him. And I was forced to take, and it only worsened my problem. It only created more problem. The stomach remained, but I started having, ulcers, started having acidity, severe acidity problems, and problems actually increased. And then I found an Ayurvedic doctor, who was also living in that community, temple community. And he told me, Prabhu, all you have is mucus in the stomach. You need to eat. And he told me, you need to eat only little ginger. Take a small portion of ginger and grate it. Squeeze a lime in it, half a lime in it, green lime, and then put some salt in it and eat it like pickles in your afternoon meal, especially in the afternoon meal. And I did it. I did it within 1 or 2 days. The pain was gone. And I started digesting everything. The problem which was there for months practically was solved by such a simple remedy. Because Ayurvedic doctor could see what exactly was wrong. So just imagine. And how many of us we have seen this kind of or experienced this kind of thing? You go to doctors, they take And especially here, they have made actually a kind of a medical system is only a business, more or less a business, so you have to get tested every 6 months or a year, an annual checkup or 6 months checkup. They take so much blood from you, and then everything is all right. And still, a person, all of a sudden, gives heart attack. Cannot really, doctors cannot even foresee. So just imagine, the medical system that we have now, people think is very advanced, but in my opinion, it's such a primitive medical system, the most pathetic medical system we have in current system. Where is a 30-second survey and giving you entire life's medical history? And where is the comparison with the system where they take blood, they do so many scans, and yet they find nothing? Therefore, Chanakya Pandit says actually, one should not live in a place where there's not a good doctor, there's no river, no good administration. One should not live in that place. So I used to always think, doctor, what a big. But after these experiences in life, I understand. Actually, we don't have, really speaking, we don't have any doctors in US. I haven't come up across a doctor who can simply take a pulse and tell the medical history of my entire life. I haven't come across a single doctor. In fact, every doctor in this country is generally, they take so many surveys and x-rays and everything, and still they cannot figure out what is wrong. No. So our medical system is very primitive. Unfortunately, is very primitive. So just imagine, if we have few doctors in the surface of Earth, if there was a good administrator, a good king, he would make sure that many others go and learn from him and become good doctors and then spread all over the world. But there is no good administration. We have administrators also who are actually foolish, who depend on the modern system, and get cheated. So these are the different sciences which are actually part of Varnashrama system. So Vastu, Jyotish, Ayurveda, even military science, for example. The military science that we have, people think is most sophisticated. But the military science that we know modern times is actually very primitive. Very primitive. If you hear from Mahabharata, 5,000 years ago, what kind of weapons they were using, what kind of warfare was there, you'll be amazed. People think airplanes are only modern time concept. No. Even 5,000 years ago, when there was the war in Dwarka, there were airplanes used. There was I think, who was that? One of the kings, demoniac kings, who attacked on Dwarka, coming in the airplane. So it's not that in the ancient warfare there was, people didn't know. In fact, we learned from the history. Hitler, from Germany, he was actually looking for. He used to study Vedas, right? He was a great fan of Vedas, so he was studying Vedas. He had a whole team of people who were studying Vedas. They were trying to find out some celestial hymns, the celestial weapons. Through sound vibration, you can invoke the celestial weapons and kill your enemies. That is much more precision. Like, for example, we get in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the first canto of Bhagavatam, we see Ashwatthama, for example. Ashwatthama, he wanted to kill the Pandavas, but he couldn't. So he released a Brahmastra to kill the last descendant of the Pandavas, who was in the womb of his mother that time, Uttara. Uttara was pregnant during the time of Mahabharata war. Uttara was the wife of Abhimanyu, the son of Arjun and Subhadra Devi. So she was pregnant. Abhimanyu died on the battlefield. So practically speaking, he was the last child survived in the entire Kuru dynasty. And Ashwatthama released a Brahmastra to kill the child. And that Brahmastra was so precise, it would not cause even a scratch on the body of Uttara. Uttara will remain intact, healthy, without any problem. But the child in the womb will die, get struck by that weapon and die. And it's not that, like in the modern time, they do abortion. They have to put some and suck out the child, kill the child in that way. No. Child remains in the womb only, but he gets killed. And then it will be, like a miscarriage coming up. And this used to be the warfare. So precise. If the weapon is targeted to only a child in the womb, it will only harm the child. Not like the nuclear weapon drop. You want to kill the army, but you drop on the city, the whole city gets wiped out. Even innocent people, they die. Who had nothing to do with the war, they die. So that used to be the warfare also. So we are actually thinking that we are living in a very advanced society. But we are actually living in a very, very primitive society. We don't have any access to these celestial sciences. Very little. In some rare parts of the world, these are being practiced. So now let's see how we can do it. So, of course, nowadays we do not have many learned Brahmanas who can actually guide us, who are actually even learned in these sciences. But it is always good to at least try to put the effort to find out, a good, Brahmana who knows the science of Vastu, knows Jyotisham, or knows Ayurveda. Of course, one Brahmana will not know all of these because all the Brahmanas used to be learned only in one particular science. Each Brahmana would be actually learned there. That used to be coming in the family lineage. So Shilpa Shastra would be known to a Shilpa Shastri only. A person who's coming in that lineage would actually be learned. So at least we try to find out, even if not in our surroundings, even if some remote part of the world, because of the communications, we can actually connect with those people and get guidance. I'm just telling you, whenever we have health problem, we call the doctor in Navadvip. We don't consult doctors here mostly. Most of the time we don't. We consult that doctor in Navadvip. We call him and ask him the guidance. No. So even though we have health insurance and everything, it's practically useless to go to even hospitals. Not that it is completely discredited. If you meet with an accident, then that's the best use of bad bargain. They can actually save your life in that situation. Not that we have to be practical. But in most part, if small problems, health issues you have, if you go to the doctors, they only worsen your problem. As I gave example, that has been not just one experience, but multiple experiences like that. If you have small health issues, you go to doctor, they only aggravate that problem. The problem is not solved, but more problems are actually through the medication system. So this is where we stand. It is actually very crucial and important now. Say for example, we want to take guidance because the head guides and the entire body follows. So the Brahmanas used to guide the society and everyone else used to follow, which was enforced by the Kshatriyas. Kshatriyas would make sure that everyone follows the guidance from the Brahmanas. Same thing we can do here is, if somebody has good administrative abilities, not that just because you go to a college, you become an administrator or you become a good, because having MBA degree doesn't mean that you actually become a good administrator. A person who has good administrative skills will always try to find or seek a good Brahmana guidance and establish his own life and life of people in the surrounding based on that guidance. So I'll say, coming to the practical terms, if you want to say establish a community of devotees, now since people have bought the land, it's always good to run by and find out what kind of celestial influence the land has. It should be done before purchasing the land. Even if you're not done, try to find out what kind of influences that land has. Now, I'll just give you an example. For example, in New Jersey, our ISKCON had some land which was donated to them, by some well-wisher. Some well-wisher donated land, but the land was in a zoning which was actually a residential area. Okay, so a person who has good administrative skill, here you don't need so much of a Brahmanical guidance, but here, if there was a good administrator, for example, a person who knows the laws of this country and how the things work out, would have known that it will be practically impossible to get the permit to build a temple in a housing or residential area. But they tried. They tried for almost, I believe, a decade. Almost for 10, 12 years, they tried to get the permission, and they spent over $1 million. Land was donated free, but they spent $1 million, over $1 million in lawsuits and, working with the lawyers. They never got the permission. Ultimately, after spending $1 million, spending 10 years, 12 years, they sold off the land. So just imagine, you can go through so much trouble. So the practical guidance is, try to find out what kind of celestial influence the land has and how it can be used. How we can actually, the two things are actually very crucial here. To find out celestial influences and also to find out, what zoning that land belongs to, whether it will be worth putting effort. Because even if you have only 2 or 3 neighbors in surrounding, it will be very, very difficult to convert the zoning without the permission of people. And most of the cases, neighbors do not give permission. It's practically next to impossible to convert the zoning, especially here in California. That's our experience. You cannot convert the zoning. It's very, very difficult. So the administrative skills, good Kshatriya skills, are actually very essential here. And that can also be seen through the celestial influences by a Brahman. So if you see that, okay, this land has a lot of positive influences, and that a temple and a community can be built nicely here, then you'll see all the things will actually start falling in alignment, proper alignment. If we want to actually make the quality of our life better, we try to take advantage, even if it's a little difficult, even if it is a little troublesome in the beginning, it removes a lot of hurdles in the future. So it's actually very crucial and important. You avoid a lot of trouble and difficulties in the future. Now, just to set the realistic expectation, for example, to buy a home, people don't go to buy a home every day, right? So we buy a home maybe once in a lifetime, or maybe, you might change home once or twice in life. You don't change the homes every year or every other year, no. So it's a place where you're going to spend most of your time. It's worth spending some time, finding some guidance, what kind of influences that home has, whether the quality of life we spend there be good or not. It will help us in our Krishna consciousness or not. It's always worth. So individually or collectively, it's always good to start on the right note. That's the first thing. And then starting the development of community under the guidance of astrological influences. You start the work on a particular time, because according to even Vastu principles, if you start the construction of a community or a home in certain months of the year, you will have certain results. Say certain months, when you start the construction of a home, People who live in that home will have a lot of diseases. This is actually reality. There are influences, subtle influences, even astrologically. So if you start developing community on certain months, the foundation stone or the construction actually starts in certain month, will have certain influence. So this is actually very helpful, especially if you want to develop a good community, a vibrant community where devotees are living a very happy Krishna conscious life and sharing with others that Krishna consciousness. Because if you are happy, you want to share that happiness with, especially devotees. They don't want to just be themselves happy. They want to share that happiness with others as well. So that actually becomes very helpful, even spreading our Krishna consciousness. So I hope that makes sense. I hope I could present it in a very structured way, how it is actually can be used in our individual and collective life. At this point of time, I think I'll stop here. If anyone has any questions, you may ask.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. It's very wonderfully explained. It's a very nice class, Prabhuji. Looks like Sudananda Madhav Prabhuji has a question, Prabhuji. It looks like he raised a hand. Prabhuji,
Sure.
can you please unmute your line?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandasvanam Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu. So Prabhu, just I have a question. So you are talking about the apartment which you went and then you felt that you are not so good there, right? So as a devotee, is that also impacts or the non-good things like ghosts, is that also impact the devotee sector also, Prabhu?
Absolutely. It does. It does impact everyone. I'll just tell you one example, and this was in Chapati temple, in Mumbai temple. I'm just telling you. There's one devotee who, was, we used to sleep in the temple hall. When we were brahmacharis, we used to sleep in the temple hall. So he was also sleeping in the temple hall. So one night, it so happened, in the middle of night, around 2:30 in the night, everybody who's sleeping in the temple hears the loud screaming, "Leave me, leave me, leave me." And we opened the eyes, lights were turned on, and you see this devotee, he was practically, jumping 4 feet, 4 feet high from the ground, jumping, "Leave me, leave me, leave me." His hand was twisted like this, and he was jumping, as if somebody holding it tightly in hand. And he was jumping 3, 4 feet high from the ground. You cannot jump 4 feet high from the ground ordinarily. No. And that was in the temple hall. So when I think, oh, well, how can a devotee be, captured by some ghost? No. Well, the ghostly beings, they have access to different bodies based on their, first of all, constitution and the kind of cleanliness you maintain on the body. Just take an example. In 2004, I remember, 2004, I think 2005. 2005, I went to New York City first time. I drove from, New Vrindavan to pick up my wife from, she was in New York in her aunt's home. So I went to pick her up. So I remember I had parked my car, New York City, you can imagine. It was in, downtown New York City. They used to live very close to George Washington Bridge. So I parked my car outside on the road, and I had a lot of, cash, all the, CD player, everything was visible, and my car didn't have tinted glass, visible. Out the car thinking, well, I've locked the car, should be safe. Next morning I come, the glass is broken, everything is taken away from the car. I didn't know that in the city somebody can break the glass of your car and take away everything. everything was gone from the car. So why do you think that happened? Because you're parking the car in the city where thieves, keep roaming in the night time, and everything is visible. You can see, oh, this thing, that thing is there. So you're kind of inviting the thieves. So similarly, if you are devotee, you're chanting Hare Krishna, and you're keeping yourself unclean, physically if you're unclean. And unclean, of course, has a lot of subtle, principles. Like, say, for example, even devotees don't know these principles. For example, if every time you go to pass urine, you are supposed to wash your genitals, you're supposed to wash your hands, you're supposed to wash your feet, and you're supposed to rinse your mouth. This is minimum you are supposed to do every time you go to pass urine. Every time you go to pass stool, you're supposed to take full shower. And if you are actually wearing shirt or something, passing stool, then those clothes need to be washed immediately or put for washing, and put on fresh clothing after bathing, because clothes are also contaminated. There's subtle contamination. One may think, oh, well, doesn't make sense how the clothes get contaminated. They do get contaminated. When you are cutting the nail, brushing your teeth, cutting the hair, all the clothing that you are wearing, they also get contaminated. They need to be washed. So even while cutting nails, these are all considered contaminating activities. They clean yourself, but the action is considered contaminating the body, and you must take shower after that. Okay. Of course, I think cutting hair, we know that people will take shower, but many times, after cutting nails, or even sometimes devotees may also do that. After taking shower, they may brush, the children. But as you brush your teeth, you are supposed to take shower after that. So suppose, after passing urine in the night, you wash your feet. If you are going to sleep, you have to wipe your feet with a dry cloth. You cannot sleep with wet feet. Even, especially in between the fingers, some wetness is left. That is like an open invitation to ghostly beings to attack you. If you sleep feet, an invitation to ghosts, they can enter in your body. So it's like, even though I'm devotee, but I leave an open invitation. Now, not every person who sleeps with wet feet will get attacked. You have to understand. Not every person who leaves his car parked in the city with cash and everything visible, their car may be broken. Chances are good that you'll be broken, but some people may not be. It so happened that no thief passed by and he saw that, right? So similarly, a person is sleeping, giving an open invitation to the ghost. If the ghostly being happened to pass by from there, they saw you, they will immediately catch you. But if nobody happened to pass by and in your way, then probably you don't get haunted. But it's like, if you're neglecting the principles of cleanliness, then you are inviting the ghostly being. Even if you're a devotee, you are subjected to that haunting. I hope that makes sense, bro.
Yes, Prabhu, that's very clear, Prabhu. So yeah, so as you said, we follow a few things what you said, especially. Yeah, probably I'll take up your advice for all the things. Prabhu. I have my second question, Prabhu. If you have time, can I, Prabhu?
Sure, bro. Please go ahead.
Shamgaritari, Prabhu, sorry for it. So, Prabhu, you talked about the family husband and wife relation. So, it's also in my personal life. So, I have seen many devotees who joined ISKCON after marriage, or wife would be in ISKCON and then husband would be joining late, or husband would be following and then wife would be joining late. So when someone is there following ISKCON, the other partner may not be interested in continuing ISKCON, or not ready to take up Krishna consciousness. So how does it? Maybe can you say some suggestion or advice on how to deal these kind of things?
Well, yeah, that's a very practical question. And, from devotee perspective, we should understand one thing, that Krishna consciousness is not an artificial imposition on the mind. Okay. So to practice Krishna consciousness is not by force. It is a voluntary choice of living entity, because every living entity has a unique relationship with Krishna. Even if a person who doesn't believe in Krishna still has a relationship with Krishna. Okay. And being part and parcel of Krishna, that can never change. The fact is, Krishna does not force anyone to be Krishna conscious. Because Krishna consciousness means, in simple words, Krishna consciousness means to love Krishna. And love is never by force. Voluntarily willing to reciprocate and have loving exchange with someone. You cannot keep a gun on somebody there and say, love me, right? There's no love, then it's forced. So Krishna doesn't do it. And similarly, practicing devotee sadhaka should never do that to anyone, including their family members. Krishna doesn't do that with us, we shouldn't do that with anyone. If somebody doesn't want to practice Krishna consciousness, they should be given full liberty. However, it becomes a very difficult situation many times. Many times it may not be. Many times you suppose husband is not practicing, wife is practicing. The husband may be very cooperative, or husband is practicing and wife is not practicing, but wife may be very cooperative. Do whatever you want to do, let me do whatever I want to do. That's okay. So the situation goes on smoothly. But sometimes there is opposition, lot of opposition. That's a very unfortunate situation, and there's no generic guideline for that, but a guideline based on the situation. And especially there is a opposition. Then they had to seek the guidance from somebody who's their mentor, and see what to do in such situation. But in general, I think when people get married, husband and wife, they're adults, they understand that people may have different liking. And in general, there shouldn't be like head-on opposition to your practices. You do whatever you want to do, let me do whatever I want to do. So practicing a religion or practicing our religious belief. But there is no generic answer for all, not that one size fits all, but based on the situation of an individual, there can be specific guidance.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
But one thing we should always remember is Krishna consciousness should not be enforced on anyone. But by your exemplary behavior, you can actually inspire others to take to Krishna consciousness, including your family members.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Very nicely explained. Thank you, Saranand Prabhu.
Hari Prabhu. Hari Prabhu. So I think if no more questions, then we can stop it. It's already, I think, 10:30 for you people. 11:30, sorry.
11:30, Prabhuji. Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you very much, Shankaranand Prabhu. And once again, I'm sorry, all the devotees, for a little delay. I started a little late.
No, Prabhuji, completely understand, Prabhuji, because it's a completely different time zone. We completely understand, Prabhuji. Thank you for your association and for a nice class for 2 sessions. Very inspiring, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Kripa Sindhu eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo Antakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Grace Shankaranand Prabhuji ki jai.
Prabhupada ki.
Prabhupada ki jai.